Welcome back from that break, and I am having a conversation with Dr. Moses Mulumba, who is the Director General at Afya na Haki. He's also a founding member of the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, quite a big name in the civil society world, especially in matters health. He has presented papers to the WHO. He has spoken at different continental grounds. He actually addressed the African Union. He has published different papers. He leads resilient organizations and is on a mission right now to grow civil society across Africa. Organizations that will be able to see and go beyond their founding members. Dr. Moses, thank you once again for being on this podcast with me. And let's get to one of the issues that you mentioned earlier, and that's the issue of creating systems for sustainability. I'm going to be honest with you. We have seen very many organizations, civil society organizations on the African continent that have grown. They have grown, built headquarters, and along the way, they sort of slide into oblivion and they just die like that. What are those key issues that have led to the collapse of civil society organizations that we had earlier hoped in? Dr. Mulumba.
Thank you so much. I think, Solomon, it starts and ends with systems. Systems. It's
many in the civil society organizations world don't like that word.
They don't.
Systems.
They don't like systems, but it's the fuel that they need. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience. Without systems, I could not have managed Center for Health, Human Rights and Development. And without systems, I had no base for even making a case for Afya na Haki. Everyone is looking for systems that demonstrate you as sustainable, accountable, and transparent. Systems are very important. Unfortunately, where we come from, the syndrome of ownership and the power that we have, whether you are the ED or you are the founding person who is leading, power destroys us. And the only way to control ourselves is through making sure that we put systems. The same way the country is run on rule of law. Rule of law for NGOs is the systems that you have. And what do I mean by systems? We can digest an organization. It has a governance part. There must be systems of governance which are clear. At the end of the day, who is the overall accountable person or body? We've created boards. We need to digest those boards. Are they boards where our friends and relatives is a club for them to come and meet, pretend as if they are discussing organizational issues, but spend more time on coffee and supporting another owner of an organization? We see that all the time. People form boards of their friends, and they are like clubs to meet. They never discuss business. Governance, very, very important. And after that, who is accounting to them? That chain has to be very clear. Is from the top, do we have the executive director? How is this person hired? What are the terms of reference? Do they abide with what they are supposed to be doing? The management team. There must be systems that manage the management team, the human resource systems. You don't just wake up and hire everyone you find on the way. People have boyfriends, girlfriends, sons, daughters, without qualifications, without being tested, without experience. The human resource systems must be there. They are professionals for human resources. An NGO that does not have a human resource function is not sustainable. And non-human resource functions for pretense and for purposes of audit, for purposes of institutional assessment, but functional human resource systems. We run money. How do you run the money? It is finance systems. Finance systems in terms of human resource, competent finance people. People that can be able to know that there is segregation of roles, that there is accountability. People that will hold the executive director accountable. People that the executive director will actually know that I don't bother doing that. their financial systems these days, we don't do work in Excel. Good luck if you're an NGO and you think that Excel is going to be the way in which you run finance. It doesn't work that way. Sophisticated systems, you have to pay for these systems, subscribe for them. Don't even try the cracked versions of these finance systems. They're not going to deliver what you need. And they make work easy. You know? If you say I'm working with ERP, if you say I'm working with QuickBooks, if you say I'm working with this, get the best version of that system to be able to move. I understand some NGOs are small. There are rates for NGOs that you can negotiate. When you're writing grants, there must be a component for systems. Part of the challenge that we have, we write grants, you write a grant for $100,000, and you're paying for projects throughout. You're not paying for the health of an organization. How do you expect to run 100,000 without systems? It doesn't work. So it's not surprising. And I've always been depressed when I go to the Ministry of Health and they say there's a technical working group. This technical working group is led by an NGO. And this NGO is based in New York, is based in Washington, D.C., is based in Toronto. But it's representing NGOs in Uganda. Unless we really build systems, we are not going to run out of that. Because these international NGOs have mastered the art. They have systems. You can't change things. And it's possible that indigenously we can actually be able to build systems. So for me, the cause of all these collapse, you see, even when you have disagreements in an NGO and the systems are clean, the organization will stand. I have actually told people that I've seen organizations that are threatened with collapse and lack of financing in certain years. But because systems are there, they are sustained. But I've also seen organizations where a weak system in governance has led to a collapse of a huge organization simply because the governance structure was opaque. You put a board that is not accountable itself. It's about personal fights and this and that. At the end of the day, the organization has collapsed. It's not that international organizations don't. We've had issues sometimes where there have been lapses, but the cases are much fewer than the cases that we have. But we also have case studies of good organizations, including in this country, Uganda, where you have seen an indigenous organization grow from an individual idea to a credible entity that the Global Fund can say, here is our money, go and run it. There's no way Global Fund can give you its money when you don't have systems. There are many stories that NGO leaders that have grown NGOs can talk about. But I've also seen cases where NGO leaders have failed to transition. The founders, they start with systems. They put systems, they make things there. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, things are going well. 10 years, things are going well. And because they are so used to the system, they begin to beat their own system. So they begin to beat their own system.
They know the system so well that they know the loopholes and they begin to beat it.
I can tell you as a founding executive director that after 10 years, I go to the board meeting, I just look at these board members debating, and I know that what they know is what I want to give them. And they will praise me. They will do this and that, but I will have given them 50%. That's a bit impossible when you're a few years into the system because you're collectively building it. But once the system is there, the longevity of the leaders in the NGO systems themselves is not healthy for an NGO.
Let's talk about that exactly. Yeah. The founding syndrome. And before even the exit, but many people who begin NGOs and start them from there feel like it's a personal thing. And therefore, they must earn from it. It's a personal thing. There's that attachment to it. And one, because there's a personal attachment to it, they fail to establish systems. But also two, they become so attached that the organization then ceases to grow. I'm the founder. Of course, before we get to the living, but yeah, this is mine.
So it's one, there's a way to look at it that way, that you see, it's my idea, I love my idea, no one can take this idea away. It's one way to look at it, but I also want you to look at the comfort that gives. Survival. You have started this entity, you have hired the board yourself, you have spoken to all the donors, and everything. The level of comfort that gives you is a real security issue. To touch it is very difficult. Solomon, I have been to banks, and the banks are just pleading to keep accounts there. Because as I told you, these are like businesses. You receive money to run projects, and the banks are in business. Before you know it, your account may not have even $10,000, but you're running an account that has millions of dollars in projects money. The bank will target you, and the privileges that they will give you, you stop making lines, you are priority, you are called, you're this and that. In meetings, you get the priority seat. In communities where you're serving, you're recognized. There is a privilege that comes with leadership in NGOs, especially if you're founding executive director of an NGO, the power that you hold. And very few people have control over that power that you have. So it becomes a real threat to actually even think about exiting and leaving that power. If you ask me, it's one of the hardest things. Being in power for 10 years of an NGO, being recognized everywhere, being a signatory to all of these, you are overseeing all the procurements. You have that power unimagined. Everyone is lobbying, to have you on TV, on radio, you are like a star somehow, somewhere in these NGOs that we have worked with. And then someone wants you to leave that power. It's very difficult. We always look at political power and we forget about the power in leadership, in organizations. But it's real power that we need to think about and coach people, but also create clubs of leaders to actually know that this power is there, but it can't go.
It's tough. It's really tough for someone who started it and founded it and it has grown to just let it go. You know what I mean? And Moses, this is a conversation that I've had people in the civil society space talking about and crediting you. And you have been an example that you can actually start up an organization, it grows, and then you leave it at the point of its peak. I would include us, including myself.
We are watching you.
Many of us wouldn't want to, the organization you fought through, its infancy, it has grown and it's at its peak, and then you leave. That's quite difficult for even myself, I should add. But Moses, the founder's syndrome, you defeated it and decided to leave the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development at its peak. And you just decided to move. How hard was that? And how important was it for the survival of SRHR? Did you just wake up and leave that you were tired of work, or did you just wake up and leave to keep SRHR healthy?
It's been one of the most difficult moments to explain to people, because everyone that talks about it speaks about it from a point of suspicion. I have received real calls where people have said, Moses, why aren't you forced out of SRHR? You must have done something wrong and you were forced out of SRHR. I remember contacting one of the consultants we worked with on the transition, and he said, are you sure you've generated this conversation of transition, or are you running away from something? I want you to be honest, because I want to know how to deal with you as I deal with your own transition. So are you being transparent about the transition itself, that you're actually going to be transiting? Is it a forced transition, or is it, a genuine transition, as you're saying? That has been difficult to explain for a long time. But my case was unique in many ways. And I don't think that it's impossible for people to think about my own case, because after 5 years, straight away from law school, this is almost the idea, the place that I've been employed to for a long time. A place that exposed me so much in terms of technical expertise, but also having a practice where I'm comfortable as a lead, my own self. It happened for a couple of years, but after 7 years, I think I got real fatigue on leadership, because to sustain an NGO, remember, you don't receive public funding from taxes. You have to fundraise all the time.
Yeah.
You're either writing a project or you're writing a report to report on the project that you've written. So your cycle is like that. Or you're on the plane going for an international meeting, going to a regional meeting. And it became a life that I lived for many years. And I felt that I had lost my own self. I would look for myself and I couldn't find myself. All the time I was looking at the staff that was growing. You can't believe the time I left SEHAD, from 1, 2, 3, 4 staff, we had reached almost 70 staff. You have to look for salaries for them.
I know.
Just the wage bill, the tax bill alone, every month, you have to pay URA over 100 million shillings every month.
I mean, I employ 10, but I'm really
in taxes. So fatigue set in somehow, and we deal with fatigue in different ways. So you either begin to close out all the system issues, close out everything that requires you to be transparent, and build some kind of dictatorial mannerism around yourself, and you survive, and you don't listen to anyone that talks about transition. You don't want to hear them, because everything they talk about is touching you on NGOs. So the founder syndrome becomes more complicated, because no one can chase you. Ideally, the board would sit and say, you go. But in many cases, these boards where there is a founder who is the executive director, you have constituted them. It's a club of your friends, as I've said. So it's difficult to get you chased. So in my own case, I actually used the opportunity to be the executive director, not only to grow the organization, but to grow my own self. And this is something I used to tell staff, that 2 things happen when you're employed by us in an NGO. You either outgrow the organization and you move on to the next organization, a bigger one, or the organization outgrows you and then it has to leave you. It has to grow and then you leave and you try your talents elsewhere. So in my case, I was always mindful of the fact that if I don't work hard, SEHAD is going to outgrow me. So I did all the studies I have to do. At the time I was leaving SEHAD, I was finishing my PhD. But at the same time, I had also done very specialized training in health and policy. So at an individual level, whether it's litigation, whether it's a policy issue, certainly I would be doing it technical as an individual. Many of the founders of NGOs get so comfortable that they forget that they have a personal life beyond the organization. And the moment you forget that you have a personal life beyond the organization, transition is going to be very difficult, because the question of where do I go next is going to be hard. I want to tell you that the day people got to know that I had said I am transitioning, I had more than 4 job offers from international organizations.
Wow.
More than 4 juicy job offers, including in funding foundations.
Wow.
So because I'd prepared myself as such, it was easy. But we've had situations where you have a leader, is a founding leader, has been there for 10, 20 years. They have no other option. They have nowhere to go. So they become a problem. So preparing yourself as an individual is very important, technically, because these NGOs expose us. We reach universities, the top universities, we reach policy spaces. Whether you want employment in UN, you will actually know how to get there, who to contact, how to write a CV, but it has to take your own initiative as an individual. But also understanding when you're beginning an organization, give yourself a time frame and hold yourself accountable for that time frame. You see, when you start an organization without a time frame, you have no goals to work for, except wake up every day to come and lead people and lead projects.
Moses, you're really speaking to me.
You have to create a time frame. It is okay to overgo 2, 3 years, 1 year over it, but don't overgo that time frame. It's going to be a problem. The organization will eat you up. It will eat you up, and you're going to become a problem to the organization instead of becoming an asset to the
And I
organization.
have seen those people.
Yeah.
I've seen those people that the founding member who is still the executive director has become a problem for the organization.
And no one has power. Everyone feels powerless to touch you. Everyone feels powerless to. That's why we have sagas. You have sagas, and everyone, things happen as if people didn't know that things are going to happen. So the founder syndrome takes self. The board can help you to discuss and negotiate your way out, but it takes self-preparation from the day you start being a leader in an organization. And it's not too late when the symptoms begin to set in and you realize that you actually have too much power. When you see your board discussing things and you realize that actually they have to rely on you to be able to move things, you know that there is a problem there. So for me, it was a matter of setting myself ready, whether I'm working for SRHR or not, whether I'm working for an international organization or not. But I had a personal desire to continue work on the African continent, and I was seeing the value. One of the things I want to tell you is that NGOs depend on funding, as I've said, and every one of us has a peak of fundraising. When I was starting SRHR with the team, I looked for $10,000. If we had $10,000, I would have satisfaction. It came. Then I said, okay, if I receive a grant of 100,000 to run a project, and the grant is 100,000, before the second year, we had a grant of 100,000, and the elasticity of the desire to receive more project money keeps expanding. So then I moved to $1 million. At one time, I told myself that if I ever penned my signature to a grant project of $1 million, I am done. By 7th year, I think, of running, I was signing on a project that was of $1 million. The issue was, what next? And all these things began to set in, and they became very important for me, very important considerations. And I realized that the chase for money just doesn't end. And this money is not yours. At the end of the day, it's not. The more money you sign, the more responsibilities you create in terms of human resources you're managing, the complexity of the systems you're managing. And I realized that at a certain point, I'm not a trained administrator. I'm a trained lawyer, a lawyer that had specialized in health and policy. And because I'm managing the organization, management was taking my professional competences away. All the time I'm chasing money. All the time I'm reporting. All the time I'm attending to auditors. All the time and I felt that I was losing myself.
You're running the organization.
Yes. So it became very important that it's no longer chasing money. In fact, one of the tricks that I did was to begin writing grants and sub-grant people, because we couldn't uptake all these resources that were coming in. So I started the idea of saying that, okay, if I receive 100,000 and we are able to retain 60,000, let 40,000 go to the community groups. So that's how we started community health advocates, but also started MOUs with other NGOs to be able to say, we've fundraised, this is how things are going to be. And I realized that there was power in giving.
That's also another thing, Moses. And I've seen you passionately, you do the fundraising, but then you also give out this money to other civil society organizations. That is not very easy for many civil society organizations. They want to get the money and then use it. But we've seen you reaching out to smaller organizations and some granting them to stay healthy and to do some work around it.
Can I tell you one thing, Solomon? I have realized that the antidote to greed in NGOs is generosity. The day you learn that I'm at the risk of greed, because greed, as I've told you, our elasticity of demand continues every single day. The antidote to that is generosity.
You have $10 million, you want to keep it to yourself.
The risk of being greedy is so high. So you have to learn how you generously give away and expand your impact. And I think this is what NGO leaders and founders need to know. That at the end of the day, it's not how much accumulation of projects you have, but how much legacy you're creating and you're leaving behind. I am a satisfied man. I am a satisfied man. Very, very satisfied. in terms of my own career progression. Because what I had said I would achieve at 40, I achieved much more. So if you asked me whether I achieved my goals, I achieved. And I keep telling people that I'm at Afya na Haki. I am just doing pieces that I was not able to do. I realized that I cannot run an advocacy entity that is also doing research, that's also doing academia. So I had to look for something that helps me to continue my own desire. But in as far as advocacy, organization building and running is concerned, I am a very satisfied human being.
Satisfied so much that right now you're leading the Afya na Haki team that is looking beyond Uganda, that now is looking to strengthen civil society organizations across the continent. And you're reaching out to so many people, so many civil society organizations across the continent. What does the future look like for civil society in Africa?
We need to be sustainable. I think the picture outside there has been that since colonialism, Africa has not been able to build its own entities that are sustainable. There are so many generous people out, generous governments, generous individuals. I have had the luck to meet the most generous people in the world that I've given to NGOs through philanthropic processes and practices. I've had a coffee with George Soros. I have been able to meet with Michael Bloomberg. And I have listened to them. I have understood them, but I've also spoken to them and shared my ideas. I think at the end of the day, what is critical and very, very important for us as individuals, as leaders of NGOs, is knowing that the opportunity is not limited. The opportunities are there. So practicing generosity is very important, and not forgetting that at the end of the day, our objective is to serve community and contribute towards the communities. So for me, the future that I see in Africa is to continuously make a case that we can be accountable, we can be sustainable, and that the organizations we build can receive money and pass it on and run the projects that they're supposed to be running, and stop and reduce on the cases of scandals in NGO sectors. This on the African continent happens all the time, and I think it's something that we need to put there, but also tell the positive narratives of African organizations that have done it. Mm-hmm. In every country, there is an indigenous organization that has done something. I'm proud of TASO. Every time I think about TASO and where it began and where it's heading.
I mean, Josephine left Kalevo.
She did. I met her in a meeting in Thailand, and we had a breakfast specifically to just tap into how she did it and how she felt. There's no amount of satisfaction.
She's doing other things. Yeah. She's just enjoying her life. TASO is still here.
TASO is there. And receiving support.
Yes, recently, by the way, TASO got some. So, even the international NGOs are handing over to national NGOs, local NGOs. There's that phase. The donors are saying, no, we need to strengthen local NGOs to actually take up some of the work. I mean, the Defeat TB project that was, I think, funded by the USAID did a transition from the Defeat TB project to IDI and TASO, which was really fascinating. Yeah, and there's that general more feeling that local NGOs now need to be capacitated to handle some of this money.
The greatest gift you can receive is to know your peak.
Wow, say that again, Moses.
The greatest gift you can ever receive as an NGO leader is to know your peak. All of us have a peak. I believe I had my peak at SEAD, and I left at the peak of myself.
Not very many of us, like I told you, including myself, would think that that's a right time to jump. Moses, thank you. Dr. Moses Mulumba, thank you for sharing your insights, for taking us deeper into what it means to sustain an organization, but most importantly, build resilient civil society organizations that are open to transparency and accountability. And that will be important for money to keep coming in. Dr. Moses, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Solomon, and thanks Ahaki team for running this series. I think they are very impactful.
Yeah, especially thank you to the Ahaki team. This is the Ahaki podcast, and I'm Solomon Serwanja.